And in those comparisons, they will find the truth. So it's more from that perspective that today I want to mention a few articles that I've seen in the newspaper in the past week that warrant some sort of response. So there was an editorial in the Starbucks News, my caffeine. So I didn't sleep much, so I need more caffeine in the system. So I saw this editorial on mining by the Starbucks News, and it was extremely critical of a release made by the Ministry of Natural Resources. It pointed out that the government was encouraging mining, that it had no intention to put a brake on mining, that we were destroying the environment in the hinterland, that we were violating indigenous people's rights, and that we were only thinking in electoral terms. For example, it says, and I quote, "The problem is that any demographic is seen by the government in electoral terms, and both the miners and Amerindians are important in their own way in this regard. The difference is that Freedom House thinks it can control the indigenous population, whereas the miners who have in the past been seen as a PNCR constituency but are now not necessarily still so have to be persuaded with benefits." So we're being critical. They're critical of us for seeing Amerindians and miners as an important constituency in the country, claiming that we're only interested in them because of politics. And guess who they quoted in the editorial? The key source of their information is the Guyana Human Rights Association, and a statement made by them about the destruction of the ecosystem. So we pointed out here many times that the GHRA is, apart from being a useless organization, is unaccountable. It is a one-person show. They only issue statements. There's no democracy there. This is a paper organization that only finds resonance in a few seminars they hold to mislead the public they're still alive, that will never reflect the true nature of their purpose, that is the original purpose, and can only survive in an environment and totally unaccountable to their membership. In fact, they don't have much membership. But why is it that every single week we see them appearing in editorials in the Starbucks News or some other newspapers? Because they take a anti-PPP line. This is not an NGO. This is an organization that is against the People's Progressive Party, has been so historically and continues to be so. And the Starbucks News knows this, And they just magnify the ill-informed view of this organization or the political view of this organization. Now let's examine on the merits what we have done for the mining sector. So we are unapologetic about encouraging mining in this country. Mining provides a significant part of our gross domestic product. It creates significant part of the income base for many Guyanese. It contributes to employment opportunities for tens of thousands of our people. And any government, any responsible government, would have to ensure that mining does well, because it is a source of income and employment opportunities for our people. We have done mining in an environmentally safe manner in the past several decades. In spite of the growth of mining in this country, we have kept our ecosystems intact. We have kept our forests intact. We have the lowest deforestation rate in the world and the second highest forest cover in the world. And we've still helped the miners. The fact of the matter is that APNU came into office in 2015, promised the miners before they came into office that they will assist them to earn more. And let me tell you something about mining. Mining is a risky thing too, because people may look at the few large people who make some money from larger scale mining or medium scale mining, but they don't look at the difficulties for tens of thousands of small scale miners who every day are struggling to make a living. They're not getting wealthy. They just want to earn an income for themselves and their families. And we have a duty to assist them as well as the larger companies. These are Guyanese companies that we want to do well. We will not be apologetic to anyone, least of all the Kite Show, the Starbuck News, or the GHRA, or the Georgetown-based NGOs that represent no one in the country. They don't have constituencies for helping to promote employment opportunities for our people in this country. And so we have promoted. APNU came in, promised the world to the miners, and then instituted a whole range of taxes that saw mining plummeted and tens of thousands of people in that sector losing their jobs. They put in place a higher royalty rate, they double the tributous tax, and they add VAT on machinery and equipment for mining. And therefore, the miners immediately, many of them, decided they couldn't go back into mining because the conditions had changed and they couldn't make money. So apart from that, the corruption with these syndicates and ministers' involvement with the syndicates, we haven't even talked about that as yet, how the syndicates became a front for the political people who got large amounts of leases for or licenses, prospecting licenses, etc., through these syndicates, but they were controlled by the cabal. We haven't even gone into the corruption in that sector under APNU as yet. And this was condoned at the highest level, at the ministerial level. In fact, a lot of them had, the ministers were also involved in mining. So the PPP came into office and we removed the taxes on machinery and equipment. We lowered the royalty rate, and we removed totally the tributous tax, because people were complaining with the increase in tax, they couldn't find labor in the hinterland. And we did all of that, and we started fixing back the infrastructure for mining, some of the roads to make these areas accessible once again. We promised that, we did it. We have no apology for it. So whether Starbuck News thinks we are doing it for the political benefit or not, we are doing it as a party because we believe that all of our people and all the sectors must prosper. But so what if we do it for political reasons? If you want to destroy people's livelihood like APNU did, in spite of the fact that they supported you, and we come along and we, as a party and government, we decide to assist the sector. So what's wrong if people support us? They would prefer we shut down the mining sector, as this article basically implies that we should do, based on the concerns of the GHRA that is in Georgetown, a one-man's organization. We must destroy the livelihoods of tens of thousands of people, or hundreds of people like in the Marudi Mountain area that earn a living from mining. And that's the implication of this article. Secondly, they talk about the PPP believes it can control Amerindians. The fact of the matter is that our party is the only multiracial party, as everyone now has accepted, even our opponents, the only multiracial party in this country, and the largest Amerindian party too, because we have a massive amount of members who are Amerindians. The last Congress, 1/3 of our delegates were Amerindians who came to the party's Congress. We have in our leadership a number of Amerindians. I came from Region 9 last week, and we had a youth camp there, and over 600 young people joined the youth arm of the party. I will be going tomorrow into Region 1 in the Morukat sub-district, where we will have another youth camp, and where they too will join the PYO. And in Region 2, we have done this right across. In every region, this is going to happen. As we promised, the last Congress, when I spoke, I said, by the time we have the next Congress, we'll have a 5,000 strong youth movement, all in line with preparing the next generation of PPP leaders who will emerge in the next maybe 10 years or so as the leadership of this party and country. And we are working to prepare them for that. And they're kids from every community and from every race. So we don't have to be apologetic. The reason we became the largest Amerindian party is because of our work in these communities. Over the years, conscientiously working to change the lives of the people in the hinterland, not abusing them by saying they're greedy and if they're getting too much land and they shouldn't get oil and gas resources if they get more. Not by firing 2,000 of the CSOs that we put in place, the largest act of discrimination against the indigenous people in this hemisphere in the last maybe 30, 40 years that APNU did as soon as they got into office. Not by by trying to take away benefits from the Amerindian communities, by diluting the Indigenous Peoples Commission, by diluting the Amerindian Act that we passed. In fact, the article criticizes us for mining and how some Amerindian communities their mining rights are being eroded by the PPP government. So you have in a couple of Amerindian communities particular cases where there's a conflict between miners and the community, especially conflict that date back before the passage of the Amerindian Act. But it's shameless to blame the PPP for this when we have titled almost double the amount of title lands that Amerindian has. And in almost all of those communities, with the exception of maybe 2 of these communities, you have issues of conflict on mining. And guess who put in the act the right or a right of refusal for subsurface rights? We are the ones in the Amerindian Act, with very few countries in the world, Canada, many of the other countries in the world that talk a lot about indigenous people. They've never given them subsurface rights. We have, in the Amerindian Act of 2006, we have effectively given indigenous communities subsurface rights in their title land. No one else has that. No, very few countries, maybe 1 country in the world that has done this for indigenous people, giving subsurface rights. So we gave that right to control the mining in their communities and to have first access to the mineral resources in their communities, because subsurface rights are kept by the government in most countries, like in this country too. So even if you have a forestry lease and you're Guyanese, the subsurface rights don't belong to you. You have to get another permit, and another person can get the permit to go to access the mineral resources. Amerindian communities were given that in 2006. And it's shameless to talk about PPP undermining mining rights of indigenous peoples when we're the ones who confer this mining right in the first instance. But the GHRA and the others, if we had bothered with them and APA, until now we wouldn't have had the act. In 2006, they were opposed to the act. They were, if you go back and check their history, with Carolyn Rodriguez was the minister at that time. And therefore, the fact that we're working in Amerindian communities should be applauded, should be encouraged, that if political parties make policies that are good for indigenous people, then those communities, they can work to earn the votes from the communities, not to try to bully people or to get a Georgetown-based NGO to tell people in these communities who to support, because that's what it seems as though they want. And trust me, this week, next week will be the NTC. And you want to bet APA will figure prominently in these newspapers, many articles in the newspapers as the voice of indigenous people. But APA is another PNC AFC organization too, and they've demonstrated this in the past and even now with Laura George's recent move to the AFC. What has this Georgetown-based organization that got $20 million US to hold conferences done for indigenous people. Nothing. They didn't get a tractor to each village, a tractor and trailer to each village, or a solar panel to each home in each of these villages, or the education, or the schools and all of these things, healthcare, better healthcare. They sit in Georgetown and tell people, you must oppose the government. The PPP, basically. Not just the government, but the PPP, because when they were in government with APNU, they turned a blind eye to all the abuses of the Amerindian community. So this same the same APA that is against the PPP, try to block, as you know, the LCDS and the carbon credit funds. I didn't see a big editorial from the Starbuck News about how nasty this policy is and how divorced it is from the reality of the indigenous people's existence, and that this organization is unaccountable and doesn't reflect the voice or the voices of the people who matter, those who live in the hinterland, as well as their leaders, the Tushos, because all the Tushos and all the villages wanted this. So just to repeat the magnitude of what we have done. Now this is something that APNU didn't do. They couldn't do because they were intellectually bankrupt. They couldn't generate a strategy to excite the world about sustainability, and they couldn't, arising out of that strategy, monetize a very important asset that we have. They were nowhere even near that. So don't let's even go there. I didn't see an editorial about that. But because of this government, in the past 4 years, we now have a deal for 30% of our forest carbon for $750 million. The Amerindian communities, 242, already received $22.5 billion in the first tranche last year, and they did over 800 projects in these communities, $4.7 billion. This year, the second tranche, I spoke of it already. There will be $87.5 million US dollars, of which the 15% will be $13.1 million US dollars, which is $2.7 billion going to these communities again. Now that's $7.4 billion in 2 years. If we look at the next 8 years, they will get $16 billion, 112 million US, which is 15% of 112.5, which is 15% of the 750 million US dollars. 122 million US dollars, or 16 billion. Has the PNC ever done anything of that magnitude? It's in our AFC. Can they even do it? Not a word, positive word from the Starbuck News, but griping on behalf of the APA all the time. And this is what APA has tried to block. And from that same initiative, we will have 638 million US dollars in the next 8 years or so to spend on infrastructure in this country, adaptation. And not a single cent of this is coming from the Treasury, from our revenue from the Treasury, taxpayers' money, all because of this initiative. That doesn't get any mention here. But just if you extrapolate now, maybe 800 projects, over 800 projects in the first year. This year would probably be, if you use the same parameters, maybe over 400 projects. So you're talking about 1,200 projects in 242 villages in 2 years alone from using only these resources. Forget the presidential grant and all of the other development measures that we have put in place. I mentioned some of them in these communities. That doesn't get mentioned. So they gripe, oh, the government is not protecting Amerindian mining rights. Never mind, we conferred mining rights on these communities. The government is treating, well, Amerindian people want to control Amerindian people, as though people don't have a mind of their own and they can't decide the differences between political parties. And it is that comparison people make on the ground that is changing, causing them to support the PPP. So that never gets reflected in this editorial, but I expect more of this in the future. As I said before, the opposition, you know, they can't carry these messages. They can't carry the same arguments on the basis that they did anything for these communities, because the experience of the community is very different. So AFC can run back, or APNU can go into these communities and one man handing out some empty bags, but people don't forget. They don't forget the things about who stopped the land titling activity. They don't forget about the firing of the CSOs. They may take your bag and pose with a little picture for you, etc. But they don't forget that. So guess who has to carry the message now? The editorials of some of these newspapers, because they can't carry the message with any credibility, the political organization. They've lost that. And so we have like the fig leaf politics. I know, as I said last week, the biblical fig leaf, but the largest leaf in the world, the Raphia regalis, I think is the largest leaf in the world. It can't cover their nakedness. How would you get away from all of these policies? And we will go to these communities. We're not as I said before, a dodo party. We'll go to every one of these villages and remind people of that past. And it's not so distant past. So let me, on this article alone, let me say that we will continue to support miners in this country. We will continue to ensure that mining is not done to the detriment of the environment, as we have done, and our global credentials on protecting ecosystem is a very strong credential. It's a strong one. It's internationally recognized. And we will continue to support indigenous people, whether the GHRA or the APA or the people who write these editorials who are pro-APNU, but a shame they can't put the label on APNU or can't express these articles in the name of APNU with credibility, whether they like it or not. We'll continue. So that's one article. Number two, I see the teachers union, so GTU formally rejects government offer. And then signing of teachers pay deal delayed for more consultations in GTU. And the reason I'm dealing with this, because as I said before, these are the two Kaichur News articles. But, so I treat the Kaichur News as, the Stabroek News as a more, these are two Stabroek News articles rather. I treat the Stabroek News more seriously because they're more a serious paper. But there's one thing that was omitted from both of these articles that strangely the Kaichur News had. It says, and I'm going to read it to you. So it speaks about a statement that Mr. Light circulated. And the statement said, "Colleagues, good morning. General Council met yesterday and made a decision to accept Ministry of Education's revised offer of 1089 for the 3-year period, with the caveat that should public servants get more than our offer, the difference will be given to teachers. These direct financial benefits will be added to other indirect financial ones outlined in the other areas of the agreement. The union wishes to have some of these benefits rolled out in the month of September." So this is like saying to his membership that the General Council of the Union has agreed to this proposal. Now, Coretta MacDonald comes along and she says, "We don't agree with this. I don't agree with it." So nowhere in the Stabroek News articles does it say that the General Council is the highest body. It's like the Congress of the party is the highest body, but in the absence of a Congress of the party, the Central Committee of our party is the highest body. Similarly, in the PNC, they have their General Council. So Coretta MacDonald comes along and says, "I don't agree with this." And the Stabroek News says, Coretta MacDonald, GTU General Secretary, provided further insight into the situation to Stabroek News as well. She stated yesterday that while the government had made a formal 10% offer last Thursday, supporting documentation only referenced a 9% increase. Consequently, the GTU's highest decision-making body, the membership, rejected the 10% proposal, prompting the delay in finalizing the MOU. So I don't know when this was, how you put this to your membership, because if you claim you have 6,000 members or 10,000 members, then did you ever formally put this to the membership? That can't be the highest body decision making. It's the General Council. And we heard from in the Kaichur News article that the General Council actually made a decision. So what happened here is that the Stabroek News in this instance did not reflect that the General Council of the Union had made a decision to accept this offer, and that Coretta MacDonald, taking instructions from Congress Place, went and sabotaged this, worked up people, they got in touch, she and her cronies, with a not large number of people, or not large number of other teachers to write in, put it in the WhatsApp group that they rejected this. This doesn't constitute a formal decision by the membership. The formal decision was made by the General Council of the Union. But Coretta MacDonald, and why is this so? We've already established that Coretta MacDonald is illegally in Parliament. She should not be the General Secretary of the Union, because the Union's rules, their own rules, said that you cannot be the General Secretary of the Union and be a member of Parliament. She has ignored her own union's rules. That's one. Two, The General Council of the union made a decision, and she comes along they take instructions from Congress Place. She's a politician from News Camp. They don't want the issue resolved with teachers, so she goes she sabotages the General Council, and then she gets the headline as though she is speaking on behalf of the union, but misleading the newspapers. So I hope that Starbuck News would look at it and don't quote her as the definitive voice of the union, because they omitted from all of these articles and misstated the decision as to who can make the decision, and they never reflected anywhere in these two articles that the formal decision was made by the General Council to accept it. Now this is the teachers' total package. Now we spend nearly $40 billion on wages and salaries for teachers per year. This here works out to it's about $4 billion, the 10%, and over the 3 years, when you look at it cumulatively, that will be about maybe just over 12%, because you have to look at it cumulatively. And it would be about $12 billion. The offer for the 3-year package is to increase wages and salaries alone for the teachers for about $12 billion in the next 2 years. That is how much more teachers will get, or 60 something million US dollars more they will get over the next 3 years, leaving out the other adjustments that we are making. Where you go on the scale, a number of people have been put higher on the scale. We have now paid higher allowances for hinterland teachers. We're paying more for qualified teachers, and we already have 4,000 teachers now studying under the GOLD program. So once they get a degree, they will get a big allowance. If you get a bachelor or a master or a doctorate, you get bigger allowances in these areas, leaving out all of those things, and then the non-financial benefits. We said we are approaching this in a different manner. We want to work collaboratively with the union. I think that many of the sober heads, the sensible heads in the union see a great attempt to address the concerns of teachers. We couldn't go back in the past, but we're making a dedicated effort to do this. And they agreed to the package. Coretta McDonald wants to derail this for political reasons once again. And I'm disappointed with the reporting that there was nowhere in any of these reports, and the Starbuck News report particularly, that a formal decision was made at the General Council of that union to accept this offer, and then it was unraveled by Coretta McDonald. So again, another article in the Starbuck News. As I said before, it's a slow week for the opposition, so I'm just seeing the misrepresentation here. They're not doing anything, so the newspaper is just reflecting their jaundiced views, so I have to tackle them from the newspapers. And it says government lacks understanding of cost of living crisis, PNCR. So they reflected this garbage. It's not even consistent, like in a wholesale manner. There's no, like in an unquestioning manner. And maybe it's not, maybe I'm being unfair to the newspapers here too, that they should really try to make sense of what politicians say, that they should try to figure, but they should really recognize nonsense when you see it. And so they said the PNCR also accused the government of attempting to confuse the Guyanese people in another way. It argued that even if the assumption was made that inflation had been tamed, that still means the cost of living remains high from previous spikes in inflation since 2020. And I'm thinking, cost of living and inflation. So they're saying, we tame, all right, we're accepting you tame inflation, but cost of living is still high. Now, cost of living is part of the inflation. So when you look at inflation, you look at movement in prices, once again, for the PNC, you look at all price movements, you look at transport, you look at utility, so you'd look at internet bills, you'd look at the electricity bill, water bill, you'd look at a number of things. And then food in price increases too is one of the elements that you measure cost of living or inflation by. So I pointed out, they don't have any answers to what we have pointed out. We've said in 5 areas, 5 of the critical areas where global inflation has been raging, that we have managed to intervene through direct government policies and kept the prices down or reduced them. And therefore, we acknowledge that food prices as part of cost of living or inflation has gone up. And we explain that a lot of it is imported inflation, but look at what we have done in this year. And I pointed out what we did, to keep gas prices low and people get subsidy and internet and water and electricity and all of that. I pointed that out several times. They can't tackle that, so now they're saying, oh, even if we accept if inflation price is down, but cost of living is high. Cost of living and inflation are like doing the same thing, the same thing, basically. Because cost of living, if you just think about it, you don't have to be an economist, you think about it as an ordinary person. If your payments for utility bills go up, then it affects your living standard basically too, or your payment for transportation. So they keep talking these nonsensical things here, and it's very hard. They also talk about unemployment, that the unemployment rate, we didn't publish figures, and therefore the unemployment rate may be up. Now, how could APNU ever speak about unemployment, and how could a newspaper carry that with a straight face when we had a massive loss of jobs in just the period up to 2020, in the 5 years, and we have 60,000 more people working now. In fact, we have labor shortages in many parts of this country, and you know it. Everybody knows that. I saw the Skychor News did some ILO report about youth unemployment up. And it wasn't speaking about Guyana, but the headline says youth unemployment up. Then someone reading that would think, they wouldn't read the whole story, they would think it's youth unemployment up in Guyana. It was speaking about the rest of the world. In Guyana's case, it's down. It's massive, a massive reduction in unemployment from 2020 to now. So again, we see this reflected on a weekly basis. And then I would urge the Starbuck News to look at Gen. I think they got caught with the terrible article, that editorial that they did, and the Attorney General responded to. It's been in the public domain. I'm not gonna, so they feel they had to respond and go on the defensive. And their only thing that they talk about, so they can't find any case where in this country the PPP has suppressed or blocked free media. We can find cases on the APNU. We had the PNC killed journalists, Father Dark. We had them banning newsprint, so you could not print your newspapers. People had to smuggle, some of the media outlets had to smuggle newspaper in. You could go to jail, newsprint in. You could go to jail in the past for just printing newspapers or having newsprint available. People don't know this. Actually, I saw the look on some faces, and people don't know. Like, I was just speaking to the young people in Region 9, and many did not know that you could go to jail for eating bread made from wheat on the APNU. They didn't know that. They didn't know that the police used to come and check people's pot to see what they're cooking. Like the temple in my village, they would go there to see if they were cooking peas, split peas, and you could go to jail. The police used to carry people with their pots to the police station, depending on what they were cooking. This is the Guyana that we lived in and run by the PNC. Nobody knows that history, the young people particularly. That's why they didn't know that APNU used to stay in office through stealing elections, because most of the young people grew up under the PPP. They're post-1992 people. They don't know what happened before. And that's why I read a few weeks ago about the state of the country, as in an article by the Starbuck News, the McIntyre report, how it was poorer than Haiti. That is what the McIntyre report showed, that we were poorer than Haiti just before the PPP assumed office in the 90s, and how far we've come. So a lot of young people don't know about that. They don't know that people used to eat a can of sardine and then they had to bury the tin. They go to the backyards in the night and bury the tin so that you couldn't, if the police come and catch you with one tin, just an empty tin, you get charged. And that is the Guyana that we lived in. So they would not know that the PNC had banned newsprint too in this country. You only had state media at that time, and there was no free media in Guyana. So just imagine that kind of environment that we came from. From the days that the PPP took office, we've always had free media. And so the only thing that Starbuck News says, after all of this to argue, they could not find anything to dispute what the AG said about our party and free media and defense of institutions in Guyana. We have removed the PNC's control over the judiciary. And we have pointed this out from the paramountcy of the party. That is now an independent branch of the government. We've restored independence to the judiciary. from the days when the party flag, the PNC flag, flew over the court in this country. That is what it was. So don't come to talk to us about independence of institutions. The parliament practically never had any debate in the periods under the PNC dictatorship. Where parliament now is free, open forum for debate. The three branches of the government act separately. Institutions like the police and the army were professionalized. The army used to help the PNC steal elections. That's documented. They used to fetch away the ballot boxes. They were directed by the executive to do that. Have you ever seen the army on the street any time in the period from 1992 to now? On election day, fetching ballot boxes or anything like that? And that used to happen, and people were killed, shot down by the soldiers when they tried to protect the ballot boxes on the avenue. They assassinated Walter Rodney, and that was recently established by a commission of inquiry. So that's the era we are coming from. We don't undermine institutions, but we are robust in defense of our positions. So I heard conveniently the opposition parties, they go to complain about the foreign agencies, oh, we are undermining the institutions of the judiciary because we are critical of a few decisions that emanate from this. But the vilest criticism, the ad hominem attack, not an evaluation of a decision, but the ad hominem attack, the worst I've seen was Vincent Adams when he was criticized, the Chief Justice recently. And he's a member of the AFC. Worst ad hominem attack. They were, in the election period, they tried to subvert the judiciary again. And when they don't get decisions in their favor, instead of going to the CCJ like we did, they were personally attacking many of the judges, not even analyzing the decision. So if the members of Congress in the US, the President of the United States, speaks about they speak about the Supreme Court, the decisions made there. Doesn't mean that in the US you have less of an independent judiciary, but that doesn't mean that you can't say anything to analyze a decision, and that is what the Attorney General did. But they found issue with it. So they want us, any criticism of the government, we must stay quiet in the PPP. So the GHRA and TIGI and anyone could be open season on PPP, and they can peddle a lot of lies about the PPP, but we must not respond. If we respond, we're too thin-skinned or we're undermining the independence of these bodies. That is what they would like you to believe, because they want to dumb us down. They want to quiet our voice. Why do you think they have a problem with my press conference every week? Because we must, as a political party, they must tell all the lies about us, but we must not defend ourselves. So the biggest threat to freedom of the press, they said, was in my tenure as president, when some of the ads were moved from Starbuck News, or the ads were shifted over from Starbuck News and they went to Kiteshore News. That was their thing. And they said I did it because Guyana Times was going to come up, and therefore I wanted to shift ads to them. Well, first of all, Guyana Times was not in existence when this happened, and we made it clear we were looking at value for money at that time, and we said the newspapers that had the biggest circulation should get the bulk of the ads. And it is a sensible thing. In retrospect, to think that, and Kaichor News defended it. Kaichor News strangely was saying, oh, we are the biggest circulation, we should get most of the ads at that time. In retrospect, it may have been misguided too, because you have to also look at quality of a newspaper. And therefore, if it is a tabloid like Kaichor News, maybe in retrospect, we shouldn't have done that. But that wasn't no major, you didn't have us threatening journalists or anything of that sort. And we didn't do it for Times, because if we're going to take it away from based on circulation, and Times had not even established at that time, and Times didn't have any circulation, how would we have given it to them? But this is a red herring. Now, to go back to that issue, to say it was press attack on press freedom. That's the only thing in our entire history. We have stood on the side of freedom in this country. We have fought against rigged elections, and we have fought against people who have tried to undermine freedom of the press. We stand for freedom of the press. I saw today someone making a post in the UK and was jailed for 15 months because of a Facebook post about killing people. Look how many Facebook posts. They had someone wanted to chop off my head and put it on a stake by the seawall recently. And it's all in the public domain. If you look at our dear friend Burke, he calls for violence and all kinds of stuff every week. And we've had almost a kind of liberal attitude to this. Yeah, we fight back, but you don't have anybody trying to kidnap the Burke and bring him to Ghana. That he lied to the people over there, saying we sent a man to kidnap him, when they went there just to serve him with a summon. He's trying to avoid coming to the court here to face not criticism of the government, a charge for extorting a businessman of money. And that's what he is avoiding coming here to. So I'm not going to get into the merits of all that the AG wrote, but we have always stood on the side of press freedom. And I hope young people in particular do a bit of history about that period, the period in the past. I find they don't know, and so I think 2020 was a good experience for a lot of young people, and they saw for the first time the true nature of the PNC, how they would invent things. Cathy Hughes and Ramjatan barefacedly at a press conference said, we brought in Russians to try to rig the elections, and they had to expel the Russians to change the votes. How would you change votes if people were voting not electronically? They're voting like this, manually, and the counts are done at the place of poll, and the statements of poll are all signed off by PNC polling agents as well as PVP polling agents and everyone, and then they're posted immediately outside the polling places, and then you just have to add up. But they did that with a straight face, and until today they carry the lies. And you know how many young people and how many up-known AFC supporters actually believe them. But if they can lie to you on that, what else would they not lie on? What else would they not lie on? And they try now I hear them talking once again, about the voters list. They want to protest because the voters list is bloated. It's pure nonsense. So, let me see. So, Kaichor News, my friends, They didn't come. Vic answered all their questions. I hope that they got all their questions answered and they would not distort what the minister said. Because they have a way of distorting things. Glenn Lyle has a hard time reading stuff, so he doesn't. So this week they resurrected a couple of articles published a month ago by The Guardian. And they said Guyanese contemplating running from oil-rich country over high cost of living. So we're running, this Guardian is in the UK. The UK cost of living is higher. They've had a massive increase in utility bills. In utility bills alone, just check what happened in the UK. So our people, they met one man and he said, I'm thinking about going abroad. Well, he's definitely not going to go to the UK. And if he goes to the US, he'll find the same thing. But even with doing that, they could not change the nature, some of the positive elements of the article too. So Guardian came here and they spoke with a number of people. But guess who were the people again? The same crew. Norton, Jean LaRose, APA, TIGI, the same people who misled the Transparency International, Elizabeth Dean Hughes, Coretta McDonald, and Mentor. These are the people who are quoted in the article. It sounds like a very balanced article on representation. That's the group. And so, in spite of all the bilge and nonsense that they told the people, the article really says that, yes, there are concerns. People, and we never claimed the country got rich overnight. We said we have to work towards that. Everything didn't go away. You think we could undo the unemployment that APNU caused in 2 years or 3 years? Because we had COVID to deal with. You think we can change the whole infrastructure landscape of this country in 4 years? We cannot. So we never claimed that. But the article is fair from that perspective, that it points out the griping of these people, the opposition and hostile elements, but it also presents a proper perspective of what we are targeting. And also, if you're looking at sustainability, so they're talking about sustainability. Now, in the United Kingdom, they had original forests. You remember the Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood, and all of the others? So they cut down all of it. It's 2% of their original forest they have. Just 2%. We have 80-something% of our original forest intact. Last year and the year before, they gave over 100 permits to expand oil production, exploration for oil. They reopened some coal plants that they said and that they would not. They wanted to ban coal, they reopened the coal plants. So you can't compare a country like ours that has one of the lowest per capita emissions in the world, that has already achieved net zero, in fact, is even with the full oil production and all of our economic activities will be at net zero when they're far from it. A country that is starting to produce oil and gas, but would be a fraction of what you're doing, and you're producing a worse pollutant, like form of fossil fuel, which is coal, and come to lecture us on the sustainability. It is only when the sycophants from our country or the gripers, they complain about this. Not a single one of these gripers should have said, what's going on in your own country? How are you tackling the question of sustainability and saving the world? Why do you want us to save the world when you already have a higher per capita income and standard of living? And we are trying to get our people out of poverty, wealthier and growing now. What about us? They never defend the countries. Like those who go to complain to the US about discrimination. And in the US, and when you look at the representation in the elected arms of the government, you will see that they don't reflect the population of the United States of America, or that the distribution of income, we have a fairer system for distributing income across race in Guyana. And if you look at the facts, but they complain, because these are the sycophants who will never, they're hoping that the external bodies will fight their fight because they have no credibility to carry their own fight. And if we had a patriotic media and a lot of patriotic people, they will pose these questions when people come here. I must say there are few people in that article who defended our country, and I want to commend them because they did a great job. But the gripers are they're going to run down everything that we do or distort it, like the Kaichor News is doing. Make it look like it's all bad here and it's great in these countries. The same, I never heard Kaichor News call for shutdown of the oil and gas sector in the rest of the world, or Melinda Janke or Dean Hughes call for shut down oil and gas in the whole world, but they want it shut down in Guyana. It's hard to, we already know Kaichor News has this problem with interpreting, understanding, and stuff like that. But the last one, Jagdeo changes tune on interest rate charge on ExxonMobil investments. So listen, it has Jagdeo before, regardless of whether you make the financing in the form of a loan or equity, you have to get a rate of return. There's a cost of capital, and that is how it is. So Jagdeo now, last week I explained again for the 100th time that there's no interest charge on the cost back. So they said I changed my tune. So for Christ's sake, one is a generic answer that if you supply financing, that you expect, nobody does it and you're an investor for free. If there is a cost to you, then you recover the cost. So whether it comes in the form of a loan or an equity, you get a return. So in this case, Exxon has made it clear there is no interest cost. They're financing the operation from equity and from their own retained earnings. There's no interest cost. So don't you think they get a return on their equity? They're getting a massive return on their equity. And that is exactly what's happening here. They've chosen not to go down the interest route, but they're getting a return on their equity. And so it is really hard to explain things. For example, you have Patterson now talking. He gives all these comments about everything under the sun to do with the Exxon now. Cathy Hughes too came out. She wants Exxon to appear before the committee. And as I said before, the fig leaf politics. How could you have Cathy Hughes and Patterson, the wife of the, what is he, chairman of the party, or chairman, right? Nigel Hughes, and one of them is general secretary, and the general secretary of the party. No, Trotman is the general secretary. They have a convoluted structure. I can't even remember, but the three of them in the leadership of the AFC. You're dealing with Exxon, and Exxon's lawyer is your boss, the party's head. It's a fig leaf. They've stepped up their activism, and they know that those things don't matter much. They can make a lot of noise for the public, but they don't matter much because Nigel Hughes is still retaining his lucrative contract with Exxon. That doesn't threaten his lucrative contract with Exxon. So it is all make-believe or feign concern about the contract. He's concerned we're not releasing documents, and they hid the document. The general secretary of their party hid the document for over a year, the original document, the 2016 document that put us all in trouble. So it is, if you hear these people talk anything about Exxon, particularly from AFC, don't believe anything that they say. I've seen the WPA now name its presidential candidate. And you know, I've been around politics a long, so I'm no spring chicken. So, but this group of people make me even look young, and I'm an old man. And this leadership, like they raided every geriatric home in this country, the WPA, and what they said, that they're reintroducing themselves to Guyanese. It's like they've been around since I was like a boy. And as I said, I'm no spring chicken. And they've been around these same faces since I was a boy. And they're reintroducing themselves now to the Guyanese population. This is what we have for politics in Guyana. It is unbelievable. Just the same way Nigel Hughes reintroduced himself as fresh leadership. He was chairman of that party twice before, resigned 2 times before when it suited his economic interests, and now fresh leadership. It is the same old political party. They have no upward mobility for anyone in their political party. We have young people all the time flowing up to the top of our party and government. This is the reintroduction of the WPA. And everything is about racism for them. So I'm going to end there with that, wishing them well on the reintroduction, the WPA. Thank you.
Jagdeo, good afternoon. Mikhail Rodriguez for Daybreak News. Yesterday, Minister of Natural Resources went to lengths to explain everything in detail. A lot of information that was out there, but Kaiecho News and other news entities continue to mislead. You spoke about having them use the information that they've received. But it seems like it is open season with news entities in misleading Guyanese. Is there anything that government can do to hold? It seems that only media, government is being held accountable, the judiciary is being held accountable, the police is being held accountable. Is there anything that could be done to hold media accountable and responsible?
So standards in media can't be set by government. There was an attempt to do so in the United Kingdom after a report was done. And in Guyana's case, we do not intend to do that, because that could be seen as government trying to control free speech and control media. I've just made a defense of free media, and I said it's a core belief and part of our value system in this party. But I believe in self-regulation. In some parts of the world, the media sets its own standards and hold the entities that belong to the umbrella body accountable for complying with the standards. And they call the media houses out that don't hold or don't achieve those standards. In Guyana's case, we have a media association that is captured politically. Now, the head of that organization, Nazima Raghubir, is only hostile to government, not the improvement of media. You recall when the last elections were contested for that leadership there, even the entity was owned privately, was privately incorporated. And so if you look at, they're only interested in benefits to themselves and occasionally to come out and criticize the government. But they're not interested in doing what they really should be doing, which is setting the standard for media and to hold them through self-regulation accountable for those standards. So what will we get? You have a political leadership in the Media Association here in Guyana. So they only come out, oh, you can have an assault against everybody in the PPP, but like women and everyone else, and they would not say a word. But you let somebody from the PPP say something about that's outside of the norm in our society. It's everyone, all of them, they're weighing. The Red Thread and the Media Association, etc. The Media Association lied to the international community about this party's role in promoting free media. They lie consistently. So if your umbrella body is lying, that's why shouldn't the constituent parts be doing the same thing? So there's no self-regulation. That's what I think is needed. But given that that's not going to change, we can't have a government body censoring media too. We've defended the right to publish. But we need to point this out about the lies. And one of the things, this is a little bit boring sometimes for me. I've made it clear what on the Thursday press conferences, but I've been committed to doing this largely because every week we need to bring this to people's attention, the lies. And after some time, they would realize the motive of these bodies and these individuals, and they would see if they have another set of information, they will compare and they will expose the lies. And that's what we're doing. Like you mentioned, week after week we give information to Kaichor News, and they're still distorted. Yesterday they were complaining, the minister not going and all of that to press conference. But it's to give all the details. What happens? Nothing. They reflect it in a negative way. They reflect it in a negative way. They have absolutely no interest in informing impartially, objectively, the people of this country. They have a political agenda. And Glenn Lyle has made that clear. He has made that clear. His newspaper is the political arm of his party that he wants to form. So if you're a journalist there, you're not really a journalist to promote objective stories. You have to write stories or have your headline or your article change to comply with the editorial policy of the one person, Glenn Lal. And his editorial policy is everything must make the PPP look bad, even if it means distorting the facts or being selective about the facts. That is why. The reason I point out these shortcomings sometimes in other newspapers is because I treat some of the others, like Starbuck News, it's more respectful because I think on the whole they try to do more balanced coverage, and you have a lot of reporters there who are professionals. And you do have some of these anonymous editorials and everything else that are political in nature. And we don't want to we want to ensure that the core editors are aware that these guest editors don't often reflect their truth, and they don't reflect the facts of a lot of these issues, and they're biased, and therefore it would affect the credibility of the newspaper. For example, Starbuck News, because people will think that this is they wouldn't say this is a guest editor. This is the position of the newspaper. So that's why we spend more time doing that.
The opposition has expressed their lacking of proper economic policies in the recent Starbuck News article that shows their inability to understand the correlation between inflation and cost of living, the rise in cost of living. The people out there would want to know, how is government monitoring policies? What is government looking at? They're small things sometimes, the rise in chicken, that government imports chicken to create a balance and so on. What is government doing, and how is government monitoring to ensure that the citizens down at the bottom don't feel the brunt of the attack of cost of living?
So in a free market, that's what you have to understand, that we have a free market. That in spite of the framework established by government, that prices move based on supply and demand. And that there would be some prices that the government can intervene in because it has the tools to do so. But it must have the empathy with people and be concerned that a willingness to use the tools in a manner that is consistent with a sustainable strategy. We have been bold enough to use those tools. We have empathized with the people of our country. We've seen the movement up from the COVID days, and we vowed that we are not going to let this affect our people. And that's why the tools we've used, 70-odd billion, nearly 80 billion of foregone taxes for fuel imports, $500 every gallon of gas you buy or diesel, $500 of implied subsidy or based on foregone taxes. Every time you buy a gallon of gas, that's what it means. We could have not done that, like APNU. And you had to pay $500 dollars more for every gallon of gas you buy or diesel if you have a factory. We took that decision. It's a bold decision. It costs a lot to the Treasury. People don't value that. APNU could have done some of that, but they didn't need to. The price of gas or of oil was a fraction in that period of what it is today, because the world has changed, war in Ukraine, demand has grown. Secondly, we did the same thing. With data, we took a decision to liberalize. The first act in October, I think it was, we got back into office in August, and we said, no, there's a promise we made, we liberalize, I think in October. And all we had to do was to sign an order bringing the act into being. Because the law that was passed in 2015 by APNU was a law that we drafted, and they just passed it, but they refused to liberalize. And Cathy Hughes was there, and you must find out why. She refused to liberalize for all those years. What was the consequence of the liberalization? The cost of bandwidth plunged now. So you're getting 3 times more bandwidth in your phone or capacity in your phone for the same price than you're getting before. People don't value that. You would have had to pay to use the same amount of data that you're using now, you would have had to pay 3 times more if you use that data. 3 times more. But we cut it back because we liberalized the sector, brought in competition. That was a deliberate act. The fact that we are putting subsidizing the increase in fuel prices at GPL, 66 to 70 million US, that Norton and the others want to remove, kept the electricity prices down. We've dropped water prices by 5%. We've now given incentives to the housing sector. Mortgage prices have come down. You think that happened by chance? And so those are the things that government can do because it has the tools to do them. But some things you can't intervene directly in. So we remove the VAT on foodstuff, on building material, on hinterland travel, on data, electricity, on a number of items. But we can't force the businessmen to pass on the benefits. They claim there is increase in freight, etc. We don't have the tools because the government is not a daily supplier of goods and services. It can intervene in the big areas to keep prices down. But in those instances, so for example, if there is chicken production going now, we want to stimulate chicken production. We're producing hundreds of millions of pounds of chicken because we've given incentives to our chicken producers. They're doing well. But if they have an issue and they can't supply the market, the prices go up. And then we then give permission for a limited period to bring in chicken so you can stabilize the prices. But we can't every day, we can't say, oh, the price will not go up. What if garlic, there's a global shortage of garlic or onions or oil that we import to go? We can't, when the importers bring that in, they would pass on the price, but then it may go down back and then the prices come down. And same thing with vegetables and stuff in the market. So sometimes you have a glut of a particular vegetable, and then there are times when it's scarce. So the farmers push up the prices, which is understandable. You can't, government can't be doing all of those things. So every week you can't have your finale or the minister on H. Waldron, who is in charge of this sector, running around in the market saying what the price of Bora, etc. That's how our free market operates. So they would have you, APNU would have you believe they could stop that. No government, any government that tells you they could stop the short-term disruptions based on prices, short-term increases in prices based on disruption of supply, they're lying to you. They're lying to you, and we would not lie to the people of this country. We can do some things, and that's what we've done, and we've stabilized. That's why we have lower inflation rate than much of the world. But there's some things you can't control. We, this government, can't control the demand of how much Bora would be supplied to the market, because we don't find out how many farmers are planting Bora now. And sometimes if you have a drought, that gets affected too. So they would have you, the Stabroek News series, oh, the price of Bora this week was high. You know, how could we deal with that? We focus on on increasing income. So in the public sector alone, you have $90 billion of increase in income from 2020 to now. That's how wages and salaries have grown. $90 billion more. That's nearly 450 million US dollars more in the pockets of people who work in the public sector alone. In the private sector, we've had another 50, 60,000 jobs. They are earning now. People who were not earning before, they may earn another $90 billion more. So they get more income. A lot more people are shopping. Not everyone could afford to go to a supermarket because the prices are steeper at the supermarket. It might be lower in the market. You have a lot of middlemen who sometimes pushes up the prices too. But more and more people are utilizing the services. So if people shift out of, like less people may go to the market, when in the past, 100% of our people, regardless of their income level, would go to a market. But now some people may not go to the market anymore. They may go to the butchery, they may go to the supermarket, they may go somewhere else to buy. So you may see the number going to the market reduce. But it doesn't mean a reduction in people's standard of living. It's just some of them, because of better standard of living, they go to different places. They buy different things. They buy higher price items. Like somebody said to me, he said people used to buy bed sheets just like that. Now they want to know, a lot of people, the thread count. It might not be everyone because you have a growing middle class in the country. And you see it everywhere. You know, when you look at all the fast food places and everything, they talk about fast food and everything. All the new restaurants, even the P.F. Chang. And you saw one man was critical of this, the opening of P.F. Chang. P.F. Chang is opened by a bright Guyanese entrepreneur and his wife who've been making a lot of investments. They open Amici and stuff. We should be proud. He's an Afro-Guyanese youngster. We should be proud of this. The people told me it's filled all the time. And it's not necessarily by foreigners. You go everywhere. Go to Hard Rock. It's that our own people are there. But not everyone can go there. I can acknowledge that. So, but it's changing. And eventually all of our people, you apply for a house lot, you will get a house lot. Tell me, honestly, if you apply on the APNU for a house lot, will you ever have a hope of getting it? Well, and if you apply under the PPP, because in 5 years they did a few hundred house lots. If you apply under the PPP, you know you will get it eventually. You will get it because the credibility that we bring to development and to doing these things. No matter what, every person has to make that assessment. You can apply, you'd get nothing under them. So this is the sort of analysis. But if they like Norton, he will control in all price increases. How would you do that? Like in the past, remember when they also had exchange control, by the way. In the same period with the shortages, so the police used to go to the shop to check your prices. And guess what happened? People couldn't sell, they couldn't make money, the stores were empty. The stores were empty. You had smuggling of the goods. People were selling under, they would post one price and they would sell for a higher price elsewhere. We had exchange control on the APNU, it never worked. So maybe Norton, he comes from that era, the 70s. So he probably remembers exchange control well. That's what he wants to stop, price increases. But it never worked then, and it will not work now. So we will not lie to people. We have done quite a bit to tackle inflation, more than most governments in the world. I want the Starbuck News or any one of them to tell us which government, compare us to governments, developing countries and developed countries, who have done more policy-wise to tackle cost of living than we have done. I didn't even mention about reduction in the freight rate, using the old freight rate to calculate the taxes on import duty and the import duty, etc. I didn't even mention what we are doing to abate even prices for imported goods. At the last meeting, I pointed out some press conference in the past what we did for building materials. We've opened 6 new quarries in 4 years. 6 new quarries have started operating in Guyana. The price for a ton of crusher run has come down back to, it went from 10,000, they told me, as much as 18,000. It's back to around 10, 11,000. But because of the supply response, we've done so many other things to help to abate costs in this country. And I pointed out, you raised one critical issue about the lack of planning. You remember what I said about Nigel Hughes and the others? Oh, let's get together and do a development plan. And I pointed out how we have done our development plan. We have a plan for each sector. They can't talk about a plan. He's working on a policy for indigenous people. He's working on something. So the latest manifestation in trying to distract the people of Guyana from their intellectual poverty is to send them along a different path. So this is what the latest one, they issue a press release, the AFC, data collection for better national policies and improved governance. We must now, they want us to collect data so we can have better policies in the country. Now, our policies are data-driven already. The fact that you don't know about this, we can't be blamed for this. So they're now saying, oh, we need data to create our plans. So we'll have to now start collecting the data before their plans. So I don't know when their plans will come, but they want data. They have no plan whatsoever. Absolutely none. This is a party, AFC has been around for 15 years now and has no plans, and the PNC for much longer. Much longer. Created in the 1950s. And they don't have a plan up to now. They can't outline any plan. Norton says, oh, I'm new to the oil and gas sector, I never paid attention to it. He doesn't have a plan for health care. We have a plan for health care. We have a plan for education. He doesn't have a plan for job creation. Remember Granger job creation plan? The pepper sauce and everything else? Yeah. Okay, I'm planting chip. So this is something that's very important. So we saw another press release, oh, we need data now during the week to start doing our plans. So good luck whilst we're implementing our plans. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, please. Yeah. Have this young lady.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo.
Yes.
Luan Williams, DPI. Sir, do you care to respond to an AFC article that alleges that half of Guyana is living in poverty?
No, it's a waste of time. Yeah, the usual half of Guyana. If half of Guyana is living in poverty, they probably caused that from 2015 to now. They caused that, half of Guyana. The thing is that it's sloganeering and just, so Nigel Hughes, well, it just shows you the inconsistency. So they have no job creation plan. And he wants to end the poverty by giving you 35,000 Guyana dollars a year. That is what he proposed as leader of that party. He said, we now support legislation to give you 10% of all the oil money directly. It works out to 35,000 Guyana dollars per year. That's what he wants us to give to people. It's less than we give to the 200,000 school kids because they get 50,000 a year. And he wants to give that to everyone. That's how he'd end poverty. It tells you a lot about. They will put out a lot of useless statements all week long, useless statements, but it don't make any sense. Thank you.